Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching. Your Notre Dame live stream will begin soon. Thanks for watching.
Good afternoon. Greetings from the Nanovic Institute for European Studies here at the University of Notre Dame. My name is Clement Sedmak, and I serve as director of this institute, which has been established to build bridges between our university and Europe. Welcome to our virtual panel on the war in Ukraine. Our topic, Russian propaganda and Western media, a view from Ukraine. The Nanovic Institute for European Studies has a special relationship with Ukraine. It is a country with a face for us, thanks to a long-standing partnership with the Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. Archbishop Boris Gudziak, the president of UKU, has just been named the commencement speaker here in Notre Dame. Our panel reflects our special relationship to Ukraine. Welcome all. It has been recognized that the war in Ukraine is also an information war. It has also been recognized that many outsiders talk about Ukraine. That is why we want to organize an all-Ukrainian panel on the question of information and misinformation. We intend to focus on Russian propaganda, fake news, and media narratives, and particularly how these narratives are influencing how the Western media is presenting the invasion of Ukraine. Statements like data is the goal of the 21st century or knowledge is power remind us of the essential value of knowledge, information, and evidence. The human person needs bread, but does not live by bread alone. We know that access to knowledge can be as restricted as access to food. It is a political challenge to provide access to accurate information. The relationship between truth and politics is complex. Hannah Arendt reflected on this complicated relationship. She once wrote, "No one has ever doubted that truth and politics are on rather bad terms with each other, and no one, as far as I know, has ever counted truthfulness among the political virtues. Lies have always been regarded as necessary and justifiable tools, not only of the politicians or the demagogues, but also of the statement's trade." End of quote. Still, Arendt insistently asked, why is that so? And what does it mean for the nature and the dignity of the political realm on one side, and for the nature and the dignity of truth and truthfulness on the other? We will look at these questions in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Early this month, the BBC has published a report on the flow of false or misleading information about the war. Some circulated claims that the war is a hoax, a media fabrication, or has been exaggerated by the West in terms of its scale. The BBC has also received additional funding to fight Russian disinformation. We have been approached by students and colleagues about reliable news sources and the question of how to distinguish fake news from news, propaganda from accurate reporting. We will explore some of these questions in today's panel. We have 4 excellent panelists. Let me introduce them in the order of speaking. Elena Romanuk is a fact checker, journalist, media expert, teacher, and editor-in-chief of Behind Putin's Lie and Behind the News. Elena, thank you so much for being with us and welcome. We then have Yaroslav Subchenko. He's a media expert and analyst at Detector Media. Thank you so much, Yaroslav, for being with us. Welcome to the panel. We have Oksana Mikeyeva, who is a professor of sociology at Ukrainian Catholic University, UKU, and DAAD professor at European University Vladrina in Frankfurt an der Oder in Germany. Thank you so much, Oksana, for being with us and welcome to the panel. And then we have Olga Yurkova, who is a journalist and a co-founder of stopfake.org. Thank you so much, Olga, for being with us and welcome to our panel. Each panelist will offer her or his insights for about 5 minutes in an opening statement, and then we'll have time for questions and comments. Our esteemed audience can submit questions using a button located on the Nanovic webpage. We will end on time after 1 hour, since we want to respect people's busy schedules. So again, welcome all to our panel on Russian propaganda and Western media, a fruit from Ukraine. Elena, please, may I give the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello to everyone. Thank you for the organizing of this discussion, for your attention to the situation in Ukraine, and for the invitation to this discussion. My name is Elena Romanuk. I'm a journalist. I'm a fact checker. Also, I am editor-in-chief of the project Behind the Putin's Lie. Now I run a project Nota Yenota. It's a game of words in Ukraine, and where we research Russian propaganda, debunk fakes, show how manipulations work, and explain complicated things by simple words. Because where fakes increase where there is information vacuum, when there are a lot of different facts, but we don't know which one is true, which one is false, and there aren't any official information. So when people understand what happened, they don't believe in fakes. But we have a lot of information. We have a lot of news, of fake news, of manipulation news, and it's really very difficult to understand for ordinary people which one is true and which sources of information is good source for people. With the beginning of a full-scale Russian offensive on Ukraine, together with activists, we've controlled more than 100 Viber chats, closed Viber chats, where we managed to track viral fakes, viral disinformation campaigns, and make short debunking and share this debunking in these Viber chats. Now we monitor a lot of anonymous Telegram channels to track Russian fakes about Ukraine, and then have they shares in different levels in articles in Ukrainian, Russian, and foreign medias, in comments under posts on Facebook, on Twitter, or under YouTube videos, on comments in the different Telegram channels, and have different speakers uses Russian narratives. We checked it, we monitor them, and explain to our audience the main points of these narratives. Also, we need to know how Russian propaganda changes from so-called denazification to raising very old fake about biolabs in Ukraine, secret biolabs in Ukraine, or from so-called scary Nazi Polk Azov to calling all the Ukrainians Nazis, and it uses this narrative is uses on top Russian channels, and then it shares in different sources of information. Also, I'm an editor-in-chief of the project behind the Putin's lie. It's a website where 30 independent fact checkers and analyst activists analyzed in detail Vladimir Putin's article about historical unity of Russians and Ukrainians, which was published in Kremlin site in July last year. And this article on 40,000 of signs. It's a KGB manual about Ukraine. It's rewriting our history, our culture, and in this article we can show, we can see all the narratives, or the main narratives about Ukraine, which Russia shares in different years, in different levels, and by different speakers in Russia, in Ukraine, in other countries. There are scarecrows about Nazi, rewritten history of Ukraine and our heroes, a substitution of concepts, a lot of manipulations, omission of facts, fake news, fake connections between different events, and so on. Combination of truth and false, and the concept of anti-Russia. We've never been anti-Russia. We'll never be anti-Russia because we are Ukrainians. We have our own country, Ukraine. We have our own land, and we are not Russians. It's a substitution of this concept is one of the main instruments of the Russian propaganda, as for me.
Elena, thank you. We are at 6 minutes. You have maybe 1 minute to wrap it up. Yes.
Okay, I will be short. There are on this website there are more than 130 theses in which we found 105 manipulations and 58 fakes. This website is in Ukrainian, but it in a few days will have English and Russian translation, and we'll share it with our audience. I want to say that Russia uses different concepts to call the war. It's spec operation, it's liberation of Ukraine, but in fact, it is war. It is occupation of our country. We are not Russians, we are Ukrainians, and we have our own history, our own culture, and our culture and our country. And Russia wants to destroy us and Ukraine. And fakes and manipulations are the main instruments of Russian propaganda. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much for this statement. Let's move on to Yaroslav, a media expert and analyst at Detector Media. Yaroslav, please.
Hello, I have something like 5 years of experience with Russian propaganda on day-to-day basis, and somehow I'm still alive. It's a miracle. So now I want to talk to you about a new type of Russian propaganda. In my opinion, there are two main types. We have pretty old and standard government narratives about Nazis in Ukraine, weapons of mass destruction, and other existential threats to Russia. Not a big problem for the West, I guess, because by now most people know that Russia is lying, and we are already well beyond any justification of this war by Russians. So now they turn into damage control. As you all know, from the first day of Russian full-scale invasion, most Western countries impose strict sanctions on Russia, and something like 400 private companies, I guess, already left that country. The result is now the Kremlin cannot even produce tanks and cannot fight the war of attrition, their favorite kind of war. Russia just do not have the economy and time for that. So to fight sanctions, they adapt and invent new second narrative. We nicknamed it Good Russians. The idea is pretty simple. Non-governmental Russian media and their bots in social media are trying to persuade the world that this is only Putin's war, and common Russians took no responsibility whatsoever. They should not feel sanctions, definitely should not lose their jobs. And it just so happens that some of these jobs are making tanks. We have already seen many examples of that, but because we have only 5 minutes, Maria Ovsyannikova, woman with no to war sign on Russian television. When this happened, when she interrupted a newscast with her sign, she became an international star. Most popular topic on Reddit, front pages of Western newspapers. That kind of attention that the Russian government loves to end with a prison sentence or just some old-fashioned poison, but not this time. Ovsyannikova paid $300 fine, and that is all for now. She has worked on that channel, Первый канал, through the war against Georgia, Second Chechen War, annexation of Crimea, everyday killings on Donbass. She was part of Russian lies for 19 years, but after one sign, She is a hero now. Hero who gives interviews to Western media and, of course, speak against sanctions. She is repeating that it's just Putin's war. Common Russians do not have anything to do with it, and so they should not struggle. There are already private companies that use that narrative and continue to operate in Russia. But of course, it's a lie. Russians have everything to do with war that their own country wages. All polls show that more than half of Russian people support war against Ukraine. There are 200,000 Russians soldiers in Ukraine now. Russia voted or supported or tolerated Putin for 20 years already. And to be honest, by now, it's just history thing. Russia tried to conquer Ukraine at least once every century. The last time, precisely 100 years ago in 1922, it all ended with the creation of Soviet Union, full-scale genocide of Ukrainians called Holodomor, and the repressions so wide and so evil that it was called the Great Terror. It's not Putin's war. By all we know, he could be just Lenin with Stalin waiting after him. So it's essential to stop Russia, country, not just one man. Thank you.
Thank you, Yaroslav, for this clear message. And that's a narrative we come across quite often. You know, it's Putin's war, it's not Russia's war. So I'm eager to discuss that later on. Thank you, Yaroslav. Oksana, a professor of sociology, will be next. Thank you, Oksana, for joining us. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this discussion. It's a great pleasure for me to be here, and especially to be with my colleagues who are practically involved in the work of analyzing and refuting propaganda messages. I think it's very important. My colleagues work with separate kind of propaganda messages, but I prefer to talk about the propaganda in a wide context because it's very important for me to understand how it's work, to understand the mechanism of circulating of the propaganda messages, because I'm a sociologist, and of course it's my point of view on this. As a sociologist, I can see this reflection of propaganda cliches in the words of ordinary people, and I'm happy to share some of my observation with you. The Russian side often used technology of absurdity in its communication. This technology was tested as a form of political struggle against the system in the late USSR. I was studying this third culture, so-called third culture in the USSR, and I know very well how this technology of absurdity works, but now it's become a powerful tool for influencing people's mind in present-day world. It is a form of manipulation in which you receive a message so absurd that you don't even know how to respond to it. You find yourself trapped because if you begin responding in this paradigm of thinking, you start recognizes the possibility of such formulations and this way of speaking in general. Such opinions are often illogical, but this does not prevent ordinary people from sincerely believing in capable things. This characteristic of human perception was very well described by Alfred Schutz when he argued that our knowledge of the world is sufficient rather than complete. There is a certain level of information sufficiency for us and not homogeneous. So diametrically opposite views and evaluation can easily coexist in the mind of one person. Under the influence of propaganda, such a narrative unfolds around the key trigger words. And in the process of the interview, for example, when I conduct my in-depth interviews, it becomes evident how it's happened. After some time of your conversation, a new trigger words appears and you start talking to practically a new person. I was very surprised when I analyzed these transcripts of in-depth interview of people who was very actively involved, voluntarily involved in this first stage of Russian aggression in 2014. And I see how it's work, how it's really work on the level of ordinary person. And of course, because of the lack of the time, maybe I only start or only mention some techniques, some technologies, but after that, I hope we come back to this discussion because it was very interesting. Elena mentioned this was denazification. It's a very important concept which we could discuss today. And I thank you to this start our conversation about the Ovsyannikova case. It's really very interesting from my point of view. And if I come back to these different type of techniques, for example, the next techniques is the substitution of concept. Why I talk about denazification? Because it's a very good example how to change the perception of the words, how to change the original meaning of the words. But in our case, all it starts from the terms of federalization. It was one of the first case which used by Russian propaganda and in the first step of Russian invasion in 2014. My colleague from Donetsk National University, Dr. Kipin, conducted a survey in Donetsk in the spring of 2014, in which he asked about support for different models of state structure using political projects that we actively voiced in the media. And among them, they talk about the unitary Ukraine, Ukraine with partial autonomy of Donetsk and Lugansk region, and of course the project for federalization of Ukraine, because it was the key word for Russian propaganda in this stage. But in another question, however, he also asked how exactly the respondents understood what federalization meant. This study clearly showed that those people who were actively advocating a federal project in Ukraine under the influence of Russian propaganda, for the most part, did not understand what it means. And it's absolutely clear. You could see when you compare these results of sociological survey. It's one way how to check this information. It's one way how to prove some information and how to diversify this propaganda information and other type of information. And maybe we will have a time to talk about the other type of technologies. For example, it's very important for me to talk about this technique to change the chronology to sequence of events. It's very important in our case when we talk about the NATO and a perception of the NATO from the side of Ukrainian population and how it's described in Russian propaganda. And in this case, we see how the Russian propaganda changed the chronology because before the Russian aggression, for example, before 2014, only 16 or 17% of the population in Ukraine supported the NATO membership. But after the occupation of Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, the number of those who supported NATO membership increased to over 40% in Ukrainian society. And in 2021, about 60% of respondents in Ukraine were already ready to support NATO membership for Ukraine. Taking into account this dynamic, it is obvious that is the threat of NATO strengthening in Ukraine arose not before, but as a result of Russian aggression in Ukraine. And many other cases, I think we will discuss it maybe today, maybe in our future, on our future meetings, and maybe last statement from my side. I think it's very important to discuss in what words we talk about this conflict. When we talk about this difference between naming of the conflict in Western media, in Ukrainian media, in Russian media, it's very, very important to understand what terminology we use. Thank you very much, and stop here.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Thank you so much, Oksana. We have heard it from Alona before, the terminology. And as a philosopher of language, I tend to think that language changes the perception and perceptions create reality. So there is a very strong dynamic here. Let's move on to our last panelist, Olga Yurkova, a journalist and co-founder of stopfake.org. Olga, thank you so much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good evening, dear colleagues. Thank you so much for having me and for organizing this important discussion. Let me tell you a bit about the information support of the Kremlin invasion of Ukraine, which is going on now. Of course, I will repeat a little what my colleagues have said, since we are talking about the same subject. I will try to add to the discussion a perspective that comes from our work. Elena spoke mainly about the present, Yaroslav spoke about the future, and also gave a broad view of our history, and Oksana explained the mechanisms, how it works. So let me tell you a little about the near past. This war is a hybrid war that combines ordinary, like conventional war, irregular war, and cyber warfare with other methods of influence, such as fake news, diplomacy, foreign interference in the elections, and so on. And first of all, I would like to say that Russia has been preparing the ground for the invasion for a very long time. We at Stop Fake have been following the Kremlin narrative since 2014. Then Russia invaded Crimea, and a huge number of fake news about Ukraine appeared in the information space, spread by people who called themselves my colleagues, journalists. And then I and my real colleagues, Ukrainian journalists, who stick to the journalistic standards, and also teachers of the Mohila School of Journalism, created the Stop Fake project. The idea was simple: take a piece of news, check it with verifiable proofs. If it turns out to be fake, put it on our website. If it's not fake, do nothing. So today, in 8 years, we have an archive of more than 5,000 refuted fake news, created mostly by Russian media, and also spread abroad. And this allows everyone to understand the scale of Russia's lies. And we have researched several times the narratives behind this fake news. And you can easily recognize them. These are narratives that Ukraine is a Nazi state, a failed state, a state run by a junta who came to power as a result of a coup d'etat, and so on. And in previous years, the Kremlin media has created many false stories about Ukrainian fascists who allegedly extinguished the so-called people of Donbass, genocide the Russian-speaking population of Ukraine, rape old ladies, and crucify babies, and so on. At the same time, they tried to combine their aggressive appeals with the image of a peaceful Russia, which allegedly does not interfere in the alleged civil war in Ukraine. Although, in fact, it was Russia's military aggression. And in July 2021, Russia's President Vladimir Putin published an article full of historical fakes, what Yaroslav also mentioned. In it, he stated that Russians and Ukrainians are the one people, and accused the Ukrainian government of justifying the state's independence by denying its past. In the Russian military, this article has become mandatory for all soldiers to read. And in December last year, Putin said that the events in Donbass reminded him of genocide. Although, in fact, there is no sign of genocide in Ukraine. On the other hand, the population of the occupied territories in eastern Ukraine has dropped dramatically, almost halving. And this is shown by the calculation of UN experts. And summing up, they created an ideological basis for Russia's actions. After that, Russia began to look for the casus belli, the reason for the attack on Ukraine, by bringing heavy weapons and tens of thousands of troops to the border with Ukraine. Russia has tried to spread the narrative that Ukraine is going to attack Donbass, being allegedly incited to do so by the United States. And when British and American intelligence have repeatedly exposed Russia's plans to invade Ukraine, Vladimir Putin just on February 24, attacked Ukraine for no reason. And after that, disinformation began to serve military needs. There are several audiences to which the disinformation is directed. The people and the army of Russia itself, the people and the army of Ukraine, the world community, of course. And in general, this is typical military propaganda, the same as that used during the First and Second World Wars. It is aimed at convincing their own people and soldiers of the justification for the attack, as ordinary citizens will soon experience sanctions and other economic hardships. And soldiers.
Thank you, Olga. You are at 6 minutes. Maybe 1 minute to wrap it up, Olga, please.
Okay, 1 minute, yes. Yes, and okay, let me just mention about the denazification and demilitarization. It's important because in his speech on February 21 this year, Putin relied on these terms, like they will be the cause of the invasion, and it was really reminiscent of Hitler's rhetoric of the 1930s. Hitler often used words with the prefix "der" to justify invading other countries. And also an article about what will happen after the liberation of Ukraine appeared on the website of the propaganda channel RIA Novosti. Also, in this article, the columnist described Putin as the final solution to the Ukrainian question. It also resembles Hitler's rhetoric about Jews. So it's okay. And one second. And just this weekend, Russian media and Telegram channels began actively spreading photos of mutilated human bodies and videos of abuse, of tortures, claiming that the Ukrainian military was torturing captured Russian soldiers. But it's this photos. There is no evidence that the Ukrainian military is being tortured by Russians in the video, or maybe quite the opposite. Yeah, and. Yes, and unfortunately, just about very short remark about Western media, that some Western media spread these photos without any check. Unfortunately, some media like Bild, German Bild, or Italian La Repubblica, really big media. And it's I would like to just arise the question about the journalistic standards now, because it's also.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you. We can discuss it in the panel. Thank you so much, Olga. So we see concepts, we see narratives, we see images here at play, and we have a number of questions come in. If you allow me to direct the questions to a panelist, I would like to direct the first question to Yaroslav, if I may. Yaroslav, the question is, where should those who are fighting Russian propaganda focus their energies? On identifying fake news spread within Ukraine, within Russia, or internationally?
So my rating is internationally, in Russia, and then in Ukraine. Internationally, because we need all help that we could get. And Russia tries to prevent it. They tries to prevent planes, tanks, ammunition to Ukraine, sanctions. So it is priority number one. Then in Russia, because people in Russia decided what Russia will or won't do. And then in Ukraine, because in Ukraine we have unity now. There are no one Russian politics in Ukraine that spreads aggression. They all disappear somewhere. So in my opinion, we do not have a big problem with fakes in Ukraine, but we have a problem internationally and in Russia.
And in Russia. Great. Thank you, Yaroslav, for the very precise and brief response. I have a question for Alona, please. Alona, the question is, you said that fake news grows within an information vacuum. A big concern then should be getting reliable information about those parts of Ukraine that have been most devastated by Russian attacks and which are most difficult to access. Mariupol comes to mind. Have we seen more fake news emerging about what's happening on the ground in those places where we have all these devastations happening?
So sorry, I have a bad internet connection and don't hear the whole question. Can you repeat, please?
I try to repeat, Alona. The question is, there are some areas in Ukraine that have been devastated by the Russian invasion. And obviously it will be difficult to get reliable information about Mariupol. How do you see this problem about devastated areas and proper information?
Yes, our government development a very good app for smartphones. It's Dia, and there are Dia TV, and people can get news from this app. The official news, the news from Ukraine without propaganda. Also, we have Ukrainian radio in every place in Ukraine, and we have I don't like a lot this channel, but the channel Dom, it's a Ukrainian channel in Russian language. It's for people who live in occupied territory. So I think people can use these sources of information to know what happened in Ukraine.
Excellent. Alona, may I ask a follow-up question? And I'm an outsider, so please don't take it personally. So if I were in President Zelensky's role, I would have to encourage my people. I would have to give them the kind of information that helps them to endure. Do you see any reason for the Ukrainian government to be careful with the kind of information that they pass on?
Okay. I encourage the information which our government spread is fact. It's they are fact information. It's
Yes.
not propaganda or fake news. But we also have media. It's like Liganet, Ukrinform, and so on, where we can read or see or listen to fact news. Not from the office of the president or of the government structure, but of the journalist's point of view. Also, detector media, which Yaroslav represents. We have a lot of sources of information which explain what happened in Ukraine. And if you let me to add by the concept of good Russians, very short point of view, when Russians say, "Oh, it's not our war; it's Putin's war. It's not a war of Russians." We can open the Constitution of Russian Federation, and in one of the first articles, we can read the power of the source of the power in Russian Federation is people. So it's not Putin's war, and it's not like that. Thank you.
Excellent point. Thank you, Alona. Talking about the good Russians and the question of information flow in Russia, may I ask a question to Oksana, please? As a sociologist, you might have some insight. And the question is really about what access to information would everyday Russians have, and what is their moral obligation to discern what is truthful and what is propaganda. And there's a background to the question. Novaya Gazeta, the Russian newspaper that helped define fearless journalism in post-Soviet era, and whose editor, Dmitry Muratov, shared the Nobel Peace Prize last year, has suspended publication on Monday after receiving a second warning from Russia's telecommunications regulator. So the question is, how do everyday Russians find credible information, Oksana?
But maybe I start how average Ukrainian person finds the information, right information. I think it is a very important question which you addressed to Alona when we talk about, for example, Mariupol. We must understand when we talk about the country which I experienced the war, real war, we have Russian propaganda on the one side and we have Ukrainian propaganda on the other side. It's absolutely normal situation in the context of the war. But we must understand Ukrainian society. It's very important. We lived during 8 years in the condition of the real war and informational war. war. I'm absolutely agree with colleagues that we must talk about this hybrid war in this context, and Ukrainians, average person in Ukraine, have a very high level of knowledge how to check information. During all these 8 years, in Ukraine, we have a very specific situation from the beginning of our independence. We had a very low level of trust, institutional trust. What it means that average person in Ukraine didn't trust to president, parliament, law enforcement system, etc., etc. Why it's so important when we talk about the circulation of information? Because it pushes average person to check all information which we received from our main institute in the States. It's it's my one point connected to Ukrainian society. But what about the Russian society? It's really very important because my colleague says I'm agree with this point of view, and I present my position to this. I think that Russians must have a collective responsible for this situation. And it's absolutely true that it's not war for one person. It's a war. It's about all society. But how to talk about these collective responsibility? It's a very difficult way, and we must find a right language how to talk about this collective responsibility, because when we talk about 61% of Russians who support this political course by Putin, it's not correct information, because it's not possible to have a survey about opinion in authoritarian state and in totalitarian state, because we have not a free opinion in this society. And it's not an argument, and we must find the other argument when we talk about this collective responsibility of the society. But what about sources? What the sources of information for Russian people? It's other very difficult question, how we use this information. We, for example, on the occupied territory of Donetsk and Lugansk region, all this time, people have the free access to internet, and they could find any information if they wish, but it's very important if they.
Thank you, Oksana. I think that's a very important point, not only about collective responsibility, but also about access to the internet in the Eastern province. But may I give the same question to Olga, if I may? So that the question is, if you have a person in Russia, let's say in rural Russia, how would this person have access to accurate information? What's your expertise, Olga?
My expertise about rural Russia is, unfortunately, I'm not an expert in this.
Well, let's say Russia. So if you're an everyday Russian person, like an ordinary Russian citizen, how can you access accurate information?
I just think that even in the, like each, I think that first of all, it depends on our will to find out the truth.
Yeah.
So if I really want to know what's going on, I will. It's not a problem. For example, also in rural Russia, to access the internet and to Google and to use some VPN, for example, and find out what, for example, Ukrainian media tell about this. Yeah, and. Yes, I think that first of all, people don't want to find out what is true and what is false. Yeah.
Is there anybody else on the panel who would have an insight? So Olga mentioned VPN, and you Google the internet. Is that the best way for the ordinary Russian person to access accurate information? Olga also said it's a matter of goodwill rather than access to sources. Anyone else? Maybe Yaroslav?
I kind of agree with Olga, because not a long time ago, I wrote a big piece about censorship in China, and now Russia looks like China a bit. And in China, there are almost no Western website, Western media, and they have their own. They have their own Facebook and other stuff like that. But if Chinese people want to know the truth, they will use some obscure language to talk about things that are forbidden in their social media. They will use VPN, and they will fight for the opportunity to know the truth. So yeah, it's just like kind of mind stuff. You need to want to know.
Okay.
When you want something, you will find a way. But if you do not want, what can we do? I want to add just a little thing about Novaya Gazeta, because today the Dr. Media published a big piece about Russian liberal media. In this war, they were not so oppositional to government like before. Russian forbids them to use the word war itself, and they agree. Even in quotes like Macron talk with Putin about, and then Novaya Gazeta uses just 3 dots, no war. Like Pope Francis talk about three dots in Ukraine, and they cut other things in their text and quotes, and they fault for censorship. So they're not so oppositional in this war like they could be, and they should be as a journalist, as real liberal journalists.
Got it. Thank you, Yaroslav. Alona, may I ask a question to you? How do you combat the growing presence of deep fake videos, including those showing President Zelensky, one circulating recently that purportedly shows him telling his countrymen to surrender? Yaroslav is smiling, but Alona, give it a try.
Okay, I try really with the beginning of full-scale invasion, Russian invasion on Ukraine. We observe the increase of video fakes. It's video fakes from Russian television, from different sources. Also, we saw deep fake with Volodymyr Zelensky. But the first tip is to ask the question: can it be true? Can our president tell this to the audience? It's not about which is how look his eyes or his mouth or his the border or between his neck and his face. We can see this, but the critical thinking. Can it be true? Can our president say it now? If he said 2 hours ago in the live stream another thing? It's the main tip.
Thank you, Alona. Olga, do you have any experience with these deep fake videos circulating now?
Yes, we just we have such experience with, for example, this President Zelensky's appeals you mentioned. And I would like to add just one perspective to this. It's important to have a good state communication. To explain people that this can be the case, and we have 2 bodies in Ukraine for countering disinformation. One of them is the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National State Security and Council of State Security and Council of State Security and they do a really great job, because in their Telegram channel we have a lot of Russian Telegram channels who spread a lot of such military disinformation, and they in their Telegram channel they tell people what about, for example, data from the intelligence, because they have an access for this intelligence data, security service data, security service of Ukraine data, and so on. And they explain how it works. For example, they just write that today it can be the case that the deepfake video will be spread by some sources, and it's important.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you, Olga. Oksana, may I ask a question to you? It's about this phenomenon that, and that's a question that came in, that older Russians who remember the USSR, and they remember the USSR lying to them, that these older Russians are most susceptible to the ridiculous lies of the Russian government. How come? Oksana?
It's a really very difficult question, and not for 5 minutes or not for 3 minutes, but how it's work. It's really very important for me to understand how it's work in Russian society. But we must talk not only about the whole USSR, but I think the main topic in this Russian propaganda is the victory in Great Patriotic War, and this concept of the Great Patriotic War for Russian society. It's a main topic, which create this perception of present day situation. And we mentioned this term today, denazification. It's totally connected things. When in Russian society, we have this model of the victory of the Great Patriotic War, it's correlated with this term of denazification. It's make a bridge between these events during the Soviet time and present day, and why it's push people to support power in this political course, which called denazification.
That's helpful. No, Oksana, that's helpful. Can we return, since we got a question, to the VPN question? So maybe I can ask Yaroslav for his expertise. So some of you suggested the ordinary Russian can use VPN and then access accurate information. And the question is, well, what about people who don't trust their government or the government media? And do they have access to VPNs? So in the United States, we may assume that older generations would have little knowledge or access to VPNs. Is that not the case in Russia? Yaroslav, VPN.
Yes, of course. I am in my bunker now.
Oh, wow, welcome.
Yeah, thank you. So we must understand that it's a sad truth, but we cannot win everybody. There will be like 15% of people in any society that will just do not know the truth. It just is the question of majority and minority. We cannot win everyone. In any country in the world, in the USA, in the British, Russians, Ukrainians, there will always be some kind of people that believe in nonsense, in some crazy theory. Yeah, they do not use VPN, they do not look and see good media. It's just people that we can't win it. It's sad, but it's true. And I also want to add just a small thing about deepfakes, because I have some kind of experience with it. First of all, the deepfakes with Zelensky was just awful. To be honest, it was childish level of deepfake.
Okay.
Yes, and second of all, Russia do not need deepfake. To be honest, it's not their style. Their style is leak something to Financial Times, like 12 points where Ukraine can just lose their country, lose their territories, agree to not join NATO, and something like that. And then the Ukrainians will fight over it. Over these just words. They do not need video for that. It's not their style.
Okay, thank you, Yaroslav. Maybe a question for Olga, and then we are coming to the end. And the question is, since you talked about the will to find out the truth, Peter Pomerantsev says that Putin uses propaganda to sow confusion, making contradictory claims so that the Russian people give up trying to discern the truth. In their confusion, they give up trying to discern the truth. Is that the case here? Or does Putin hope that different audiences will actually embrace one or other of these propagandistic stories? Olga, what do you think?
Yes, this is the case. Yeah, and I am completely agree with Peter. And yes, we following different like directions of Russian propaganda for different audiences, and we see also that they use completely different messages for different audiences. Sometimes they are contradictory. It's not their goal to create some like a consequent image of reality. They just try to solve the confusion and also to solve the division in different societies, not just in Ukrainian society, but it's also the case for Ukraine, but also in different Western country society. For example, Russia was actively promoting COVID disinformation during the pandemic.
Thank you, Olga. So we have 2 more questions and 3 more minutes, so this will be a little bit of a challenge. A question for Alona, maybe the last one, and then we have the last statements of the panelists. Alona, is Telegram or other apps a benefit for sharing good information or more of a problem for disinformation?
Good question. I think Telegram, WhatsApp, Viber, websites, so on, it's only instrument. It's only instrument, and in good, which in good hands can save lives, can help to find fact news, fact information, true information, and the instruments at the same time in bad hands can help to occupy Ukraine, to kill people, to kill democracy, to substitution the concepts, and to spread fake news.
Got it. Thank you, Alona. Let me suggest that each panelist will have one final sentence. Of course, you can say whatever you like in this final sentence, but the one open question we have is there anything that people around the world can do to help combat Russian misinformation? Maybe let us start with Olga and then move on to Oksana. Olga, last sentence.
Okay, my sentence will be very simple. Check everything. Check twice and think twice before sharing something. Even especially if it's very emotional, some emotional photos, videos, or headlines.
Thank you, Olga. That's very helpful. Reminds me of St. Paul, who also said, check everything and keep what is good. Yes, Oksana, what's your last sentence?
And I'm absolutely agree with Olga in this case. We must be critical and we must check everything, especially before we sharing something to other person.
Thank you, Oksana. Yaroslav, is there anything that people around the world can do to help combat Russian misinformation? Or any last sentence you want to make?
Yes, please. Just for this year, don't read anything Russian media, because if there will be like 10 bottles of water and one of them contains Novichok poison, you wouldn't drink any of it. So please, just don't.
Thank you, Yaroslav, and best of luck to you in your location. Alona, your last sentence, please.
Yes, I completely agree with my colleagues. It's really good advice. And I want to add, when something influences on your emotions, say stop. Say stop and go to drink tea without internet, without this news. And when you get calm, keep calm, you can read this news again and make your conclusion.
Excellent. Thank you, Alona. So after this panel, we will go offline, drink tea, and try to digest the information. Thank you, dear panelists. Thank you, Alona. Thank you, Yaroslav. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you, Olga, for opening our eyes and sharpening our sensitivities. We are at time. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank our audience also for the questions. We want to thank our colleagues who made this panel possible, especially Tim Checkley, Grant Osborne, Grania McEvoy, and Jan Lektansky. And I would just like us to end with a statement that our university president, Father Jenkins, has made on the day of the invasion, where he said, "This unprovoked war is an international abomination and must stop now. Until it does, may God keep safe all of the innocent men, women, and children who are currently in harm's way. The prayers of the Notre Dame family are with them." With these prayers, my friends, with these prayers for peace, we from the Nanovic Institute for European Studies want to wish all of you a good and safe afternoon. May peace come to us soon. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.